There's a debt payoff argument that's been running for over a decade. Dave Ramsey's method tells you to ignore your interest rates entirely and clear your smallest balance first. The spreadsheet crowd says that quietly sets your money on fire. Run the actual math on both, though, and you find that both sides have spent that decade arguing past the only number that actually matters: how much the choice costs you in dollars. And that's where the whole argument quietly falls apart, because a great deal of the time, the two methods pay off the same debts in the same order, ending on the same date, for the same total cost. In those cases, the disagreement is about nothing at all. I know how that sounds. Let me earn it. Because for everyone else, choosing wrong isn't a rounding error. On identical debt, it can run into the thousands. And what decides which group you're in has nothing to do with your discipline, your motivation, or which method you'll stick to. It's a single relationship between your balances and your rates that almost nobody checks before picking a side. Before we get to your debts, it's worth being precise about what these two methods actually instruct you to do, because the entire disagreement lives in a single word each of them ignores. The debt snowball, the method Dave Ramsey built much of his career on, tells you to list your debts from the smallest balance to the largest and to throw every spare dollar at the smallest one while paying only the minimums on everything else. When the smallest is gone, you roll its payment into the next smallest and onward. The rule is deliberately blind to interest rates. Ramsey's claim was never that this is mathematically optimal. It was that personal finance is behavioral, that a quick and visible win keeps people in the game, and that a plan you actually finish beats a superior plan you abandon. The debt avalanche inverts the one variable the snowball ignores. You list your debts from the highest interest rate to the lowest, and you attack the highest rate first, regardless of how large or small that balance happens to be. Its logic is that a higher rate is simply a faster leak, and that the quickest way out is to plug the fastest leak first. It is, on paper, the cheaper method, and it is the one the spreadsheet crowd treats as self-evidently correct, usually while implying that anyone who chooses the snowball is being sentimental with their own money. This video is for anyone carrying more than one debt at the same time: a card, and a car loan, a couple of cards, and a student loan, whatever the particular collection happens to be. If that describes you, then at the end of nearly every article and every thread on this subject, you've been handed the same closing line. Just pick the method you'll stick to. That advice isn't wrong exactly. It's just quietly refusing to answer the question, because whether you'll stick to it only matters if the two methods lead somewhere different, and a great deal of the time they don't. Let me show you what I mean with two people and one number. Meet Jake and Marcus. I've given them the same debt, down to the dollar, and the same amount of money to put toward it each month. Each is carrying three things: a credit card with an $8,000 balance at just under 24%, 23.79%, the average rate on a new card offer as I record this, an auto loan of $18,000 at 7%, and a student loan of $22,000 at 6%. Between minimums and everything extra, each of them can put $1,200 a month toward the pile. Jake, a snowball man, lines his debts up by size. The smallest balance is the $8,000 card, so that is where his extra money goes first. Marcus runs the avalanche. He lines his debts up by rate, and the highest rate, by a wide margin, is that same $8,000 card at 23.79%. So that is where his extra money goes first, too. You may already see the difficulty with treating this as a contest. Jake and Marcus attack the identical debt in the identical order, and they finish on the identical day. Each is debt-free in 47 months, and each pays $7,313 in interest along the way. Not approximately the same, but the same to the dollar. The snowball tax, the extra amount Jake supposedly pays for his rate-blind method, is zero. This is not an artifact of the particular numbers I chose. It is structural, and it hands you the 30-second check I promised at the start. Look at your own debts, find the one with the highest interest rate, and then ask whether it also happens to be the one with the smallest balance. If the answer is yes, and for a lot of people it is because credit cards tend to carry both the steepest rates and the smaller balances, then Snowball and Avalanche will select the same debt first, and second, and third, and the entire 15-year argument you've been reading resolves to nothing. You may pick whichever method you find more motivating, knowing the choice is free. So if you came here to be told which side is right, that is the uncomfortable first answer, often neither, because there is nothing to be right about. You'll have noticed, though, that I keep saying often, and not always. To understand when the choice starts to cost you, it helps to stop picturing the snowball's penalty as a fee, because it isn't one. Nobody charges you for choosing the wrong order. The cost, where it exists, is quieter than that, and it follows from a single fact about debt. Interest accrues on whatever balance you are not paying down. Every month you leave a balance sitting at its minimum, it grows by its rate. A balance at 6% grows slowly. A balance at 24% grows about 4 times as fast. The avalanche exists precisely to point your money at the fastest growing balance first, so that you spend as few months as possible letting an expensive balance compound. The snowball, by aiming at the smallest balance regardless of rate, will sometimes leave an expensive balance untouched while it clears cheaper ones. And the cost of the snowball is nothing more than the extra interest that expensive balance quietly ran up during the months it was ignored. There's also a refinement to the avalanche that almost nobody mentions, and it can quietly change the order. The rate that should rank your debts is not always the rate printed on the statement. It's the rate after tax. Interest on a student loan, for example, can be deductible up to a limit, which pulls its true cost below the number on the bill. A 6% student loan for someone who can take the full deduction might really be costing closer to 5%. That distinction won't matter when a card at 24% is towering over everything else. But when you're deciding the order between two debts that sit close together, a student loan and a low-rate personal loan, say, ranking them by their after-tax cost rather than their face rate is the more correct move, and it occasionally flips which one you attack first. One honest caveat: that deduction phases out as income climbs. So for a good part of this audience, it may not apply at all, in which case the number on the statement is exactly the right one to use. It's worth being fair to the snowball here, because its defense is stronger than the spreadsheet crowd admits, and part of it isn't psychological at all. Every separate debt you carry is a separate monthly payment you can forget, miss time, or miss. And a single missed payment on a credit card can trip a penalty rate near 30%, which is a far more expensive event than any ordering decision in this entire video. By clearing whole debts quickly, the snowball removes those failure points faster than the avalanche does, and fewer open accounts means more slack in a month when the car breaks or the hours get cut. Then there's the behavioral evidence, which is real and measured. In controlled studies of actual borrowers, the people who cleared their smallest debts first were more likely to stay on the plan and reach the end than the people handed the mathematically optimal order. None of this makes the snowball cheaper. It makes it a serious answer to the question the pure math never asks, which is whether you'll still be doing this a year from now. So the snowball is not merely sentimental, but when it is wrong in a way that costs real money. And to see that clearly, we have to move Jake and Marcus out of the tidy first example. Same two men, same discipline, though I've tightened the budget to $1,000 a month to keep things realistic. Now the debts are arranged the way a lot of real financial lives actually look. There is a medical bill of $2,500 sitting at 0% left over from a procedure. There is a personal loan of $6,000 at 12%, and there is a credit card, the expensive one, at $15,000 and 23.79%. Watch what the snowball instructs Jake to do. Smallest balance first, which is the $2,500 medical bill. So Jake spends his early months clearing a debt that, at 0%, is costing him nothing to carry. Then he moves to the $6,000 personal loan at 12%. And only after both of those are gone, months later, does he finally turn to the $15,000 card. The whole time Jake is busy clearing the cheap, small debts, that card is sitting at almost 24%, growing. Marcus does the reverse. He pays the minimums on the medical bill and the personal loan and pours everything else onto the card, going straight for the fastest leak. By the time they are both finished, Jake has paid $7,200 in interest and Marcus has paid $5,393. The difference, the price of Jake clearing his smallest debts first instead of his most expensive, is $1,807, and it takes him 2 months longer to get free. The debt was identical, the budget was identical, the discipline was identical, the same $1,000 every month without fail. And it still cost Jake $1,800 purely because of the order he chose. So now you have the full range in front of you. In the first case, the choice was worth exactly $0. In this one, it was worth $1,807. And in messier arrangements, several small, cheap debts stacked in front of a large high-rate one, I've run the same math and watched that figure climb past $4,000 on the same total debt. The only thing that changed, across all of it, was the shape. Here is the part most treatments of this get wrong, including the avalanche partisans who are technically on the right side of it. The cost is not really about how far apart your interest rates are. You can have an enormous gap between your highest and lowest rate and still pay a snowball tax of 0, as long as your most expensive debt is already your smallest. What actually generates the cost is a specific shape: cheap, small debts standing in front of an expensive, large one, so that the snowball keeps you occupied on the cheap debts for months while the expensive balance compounds. The size of the tax is, roughly, the size of that expensive balance multiplied by how long the snowball keeps you away from it. That, and nothing more mysterious than that, is the hidden variable the whole argument has been circling for a decade. And even $1,807 understates it, because that is only the part you can see. It's interest Jake handed to a bank instead of keeping. But money kept doesn't simply sit there. Marcus is also debt-free 2 months sooner, and every dollar he isn't shipping to a credit card is a dollar he can put to work earlier. Take just the interest he saved and invest it at a normal, unremarkable market return of about 7%. And by the time these two men reach retirement, it has grown to nearly $10,000. Fold in the head start, his entire payment freeing up 2 months ahead of Jake's, and beginning to compound that much sooner. And the real distance between two people who carried the exact same debt widens toward $20,000. The order you pay your debts in was never really a question about debt. It was a question about how much of your future you were quietly handing to a lender for no reason. Which raises a question both camps tend to skip entirely. We've spent this whole time debating the order to attack the debts in. But what if you could change the debts themselves? Before you choose between Snowball and Avalanche, it's worth asking whether you can simply lower the rate that's doing the damage. If your credit is good enough to qualify, a 0% balance transfer offer lets you move a high-rate card onto a new card that charges no interest for a window, commonly a year to a year and a half, usually for a one-time fee of 3 to 5% of the balance. Take Jake's blocked situation again. Move that $15,000 card at nearly 24% onto an 18-month 0% offer with a 4% fee, about $600, and then pay it down hard enough to clear it before the window closes. Run that all the way through, and the total cost of getting out, fee included, falls to roughly $1,790. Against the $5,393 the disciplined Avalanche paid, that is about $3,600 saved, which is more than either method ever saved over the other. Two honest conditions apply. You need the credit score to be offered the deal, and you need the discipline not to treat a freshly emptied card as permission to spend. But clear both bars and the verdict is blunt. Re-rating your debt beats reordering it, and it isn't close. With that on the table, here's the actual diagnosis. In 3 cases, it assumes you've already checked whether you can lower a rate and are now simply deciding the order. The first case, your highest rate debt is also your smallest balance. The two methods are identical for you, the choice is free, and you should simply pick whichever one keeps you moving. Take the quick win with a clear conscience. The second case, your debts all sit at roughly similar rates, within a few points of one another. Here the two methods will choose slightly different orders, but because no balance is growing much faster than the rest, the cost of guessing wrong stays small. In a representative version of this, I measured it at $364, spread across a multi-year payoff, with both methods finishing in the very same month. That is a rounding error against the thing you're actually trying to do, which is get out. Take the psychological win again, it's nearly free. The third case is the only one where this genuinely matters. You have small, cheap debts sitting in front of a large, expensive one. That is the shape that costs real money. The shape that turned into an $1,807 gap and a $20,000 one once it compounded. And if it's your shape, paying by rate first stops being a matter of taste. And if you're in that third case, but you know yourself and you know that without an early win, you'll lose heart and stop, there's a third path that is less a compromise than a sequence. Take exactly one snowball win. Clear your single smallest debt, whatever its rate, for the momentum. And then stop and pay strictly by interest rate from there on. When I ran that hybrid on Jake's blocked situation, clearing the medical bill first and then going straight at the card, it cost him $896 more than the pure avalanche, but it saved him $911 against the pure snowball. One deliberate win gave back about half the tax while leaving most of the savings intact. You get the feeling of a whole debt gone early, and remembering that completion is the thing the snowball is genuinely good at, you keep the mathematics mostly on your side. For a great many people, that trade is exactly the right one. So, after all of that, the thing to carry out of here is smaller and stranger than the argument surrounding it. Snowball versus Avalanche was never really math against willpower. It was a stack of quieter questions wearing one loud costume. Can you lower the rate before you pick an order? Is your smallest debt also your most expensive? In which case, the whole debate is moot. Are your rates all close? In which case, it's nearly free. And if you do have cheap little debts blocking a big expensive one, is the true cost the $1,807 on the statement, or the $20,000 it becomes once you account for what that money could have done? One early win and then rate order gives most people almost everything both camps were fighting over. The trouble is that your debts are not the tidy examples I built for Jake and Marcus, so the only figure that truly settles it is your own. If you want to see in your specific case whether this is a free choice or an $1,800 one, and what that gap turns into by the time you retire. The tool that runs exactly this comparison on your real balances and rates is waiting in the member vault, alongside the rest of the calculators we build for working through decisions like this. Run your own numbers, find out which of the three cases you're in, and choose from knowledge instead of from a thread. I told you at the start that a great deal of the time this argument is about nothing. I hope I've earned it. The rarer and more expensive times are the ones worth knowing how to spot, and now you can spot them in about 30 seconds.